welcome Hillary Martin from Digger's Mirth Collective Farm in Burlington. Take it away, Hillary.
Hey, hi everybody. Vern, I'm going to ask you to kind of burn through my first slides, just some introductory material about our farm. So, and some of you may have heard me present already on, we're calling it our soil health journey. So some of these slides and the material may seem familiar, but stay tuned till the end. Find out what we learned this year. But so we are an organic mixed vegetable farm. We have 12 acres that we cultivate in Burlington in the Intervale. And we there's my team there. We're collectively owned. And at any one time, we have about 8 acres in vegetables and 4 in cover crop. And am I moving forward? Yeah. And we have a pretty, okay, it's a little slow. There's a little delay that I'm learning about. We have kind of like a small amount of vegetables that we grow for wholesale mainly. We do some farmers markets and a very small CSA that we're contracted to do by the food bank. But about 13 kind of crops that we offer wholesale, mostly herbs and salad greens and a handful of other greens. And salad greens are really like over half of what we do. And so I just want to sort of walk you through what we were doing for nutrient management on the farm for many years. We used to get compost that we would apply every spring from the Intervale Compost Project. And when they moved to Williston, we were like kind of frantically searching for something that we could use as a substitute for that. And we settled on composted chicken manure for our nitrogen, which we got from Giroux's in Chazy, New York. And then we use usually sulfate of potash for potassium. And I'm going to kind of skip over this, but we do cover cropping faithfully every year. Mostly we were choosing those cover crops for their ability to suppress weeds, cover the soil thoroughly, and increase the organic matter. We're always trying to boost our organic matter as much as possible because we have river bottom soil, so we have pretty low organic matter. And we're trying to choose cover crops that we can incorporate in time to get our crops in the spring or maybe in the summer if we're cover cropping early in the spring. And then nitrogen fixing is kind of like at the end of maybe our what we're looking for typically for cover crops. And so usually we're doing peas and oats in the spring, and then we also do Sudan grass for kind of the midsummer cover crop, and we'll either mow that and let it grow back in the fall, or sometimes we'll incorporate it and plant oats after that. And this is just kind of a picture of kind of a sub-ideal situation for us. This is in April, and because we do salad greens and herbs, we're direct seeding most of what we're planting, and we just seed with now we're using a Jang, but this is a European seeder. And so that's just that amount of debris from the previous year's Sudan grass. It's really sub-ideal for us. Just clogs the seeders up and requires a lot of downward pressure with the seeder. So we're sort of, attempting to avoid that kind of scenario. But broadly, at Diggers, we're looking at just like a very simple cover crop system. We've always aimed for kind of like inexpensive amendments, And, to preserve our soil health, we've been just really working on not no-till by any means, but just trying to reduce the amount of tillage that we're doing. When I started at the farm in 2003, we were still like rototilling every single bed and kind of turning over the soil without thinking about it too much. And we've really pulled back on that. We don't use the rototiller anymore, and we're just kind of a lot more mindful about tillage. And then we've really embraced tarping as a way of kind of substituting some of that tillage with covering the soil and promoting weed germination and smothering it back. And so we were kind of using these systems and really finding, kind of in a groove for many, many years, and feeling good about our systems. We had high yields, we had very excellent weed control, our systems were simple, and we had a profitable farm, and everything was good. Actually, I went to some of the soil fertility management workshops that UVM Extension was holding, and I started to become really alarmed with our phosphorus levels. So this is something that I came into the farm seeing regularly on our soil tests every single year. And we continued to add compost. And as I mentioned, we moved to a very high phosphorus amendment with Giroux's chicken manure. And it just sort of was kind of like, that's just what we were doing and what was working. And I guess I was just very accustomed to seeing these excessive phosphorus levels. Really I and we as a farm had a number of assumptions that kind of made this an acceptable thing that we were looking at every year. One of the things really is that, we were, even as the sort of water quality concerns were coming to light, I think we just really believed like we were a pretty small farm, and so we couldn't really be impacting the lake too much. We always believed that like compost was the best thing we could do for our soil. There's really just no such thing as like too much compost. There were cows on the land before us, so there was this concept that we were dealing with legacy phosphorus. And we also believed that phosphorus doesn't leach through the soil, and that we didn't have, we never observed any erosion issues on our farm. So we were just kind of thinking that the phosphorus was like in the soil and not moving. And so we just weren't alarmed about those phosphorus levels. But and another thing is that just kind of thinking about the alternatives to adding Giroux's, it was Giroux's just seemed like kind of the best possible amendment for us, our source of nitrogen. First of all, this was provided by UVM Extension, this kind of breakdown of different sources of nitrogen and how much they cost per pound of nitrogen. You can see at the top, Giroux's is like 67 cents per pound of nitrogen. But if you kind of go down that list and the arrows indicate some things that we were considering, it's just by far the cheapest source. And it's also regional and an agricultural byproduct. So it was just really hard for us to consider using something else. And I just kind of want to give a shout out to UVM Extension for really continuing, I would say, to ask the right questions, to kind of make us really think twice about what we were doing. And Becky really helped us she kind of held our hand, through thinking about what else we could do. And so moving forward, we did decide in 2020, finally, we were kind of like, all right, well, let's just kind of see how it goes if we just add less of the Jerus. And so that's what we did, is we just we were like, let's just see what happens. We'll add half of the Jerus, and then that composted chicken manure used to kind of be enough for us to do 2 rounds of cropping through the season. So we just kind of added some Pro Booster before we cropped for our fall crops. And it went all right. And so last year we just decided to go for it and call a moratorium on adding phosphorus to our soils. And we, together with Becky's help, decided to try Nature Safe, which is 1300. And that just kind of seemed like the most efficient way to get some nitrogen in a bagged source. And we also decided to do a little bit of trial, try to get some peas and oats ahead of our fall crops to try to get some cover crops for nitrogen. It went pretty well. We successfully added no phosphorus to the soil, so that was cool. It did cost over twice the amount that what we were paying on the Jerus, but we have consensus on our farm that we're pleased to be avoiding the phosphorus, and so we're willing to pay extra to do that. We felt like the amount of nitrogen we had was like just barely right. We did see a little bit less, kind of like the timing was a little bit behind where we would expect it to be with our crops. And if we had any kind of like extra stress, we might have seen some losses, but for kind of the year that we had, we did pretty well. We have a pretty extensive bed prep kind of time that we use because of our tarping. So we ran into timing with our cover crops. We weren't really able to get like a healthy P&O crop before we had to turn it in to make sure that everything was incorporated in time to prep the bed and tarp it and et cetera. So that didn't work out as well as I had hoped. And then this year we experimented with the use of PSNTs, and that was kind of fun. And PSNTs are pre-side dress nitrate tests. So they test for the nitrate that's in the soil at the time of the test. That's nitrogen that's mineralized in a way that the plant can take it up at that moment. And so here are some of our results. And again, Becky helped us out just taking a few samples here and there. So we were looking for something that was, we were hoping for numbers above 30. And I don't know if you can read these numbers here, but kind of interesting. That top number is 15. And that was, again, that's an area where we had Sudan grass the previous year. So a lot of that debris was probably tying up that nitrogen. And there was kind of a cool thing that we noticed here was like the numbers where we sampled underneath the tarp were a little bit higher than when they were not, when we sampled outside of a tarp. And then the third number in each section you can see are quite low, and that's after we've come through and harvested. So
you should wrap it up, Hillary, pretty soon.
Okay. All right. Okay. And so I'll just skip ahead. And this is just kind of like showing, we were looking more carefully at the plant available nitrogen and how it progressed, because we were trying to be careful about how much we were putting down and making sure it would be available when we need it. And so then we're just excited next year to really incorporate this PSNT tests more around more parts of the farm to see, if the nitrogen is where we want it to be. And if it's not, we can side dress where applicable. And, other things I want to sort of hone for this coming year is just our record keeping and keeping track of all of these different rates and sampling of data, and continue to try cover cropping for nitrogen. And then in the future, kind of very intrigued about no and low till practices and possibly using mycorrhizae to help access nutrients that are in the soil. And I'll end there.
Great. Thank you so much. I did see one question from Nick Cook about the new Vermont Pay for Phosphorus program, asking if you'd looked into that. And Nick, if you have some more info to put in the chat, that'd be great.
I did see that, yes.
Any other questions coming in for Hillary? One question I have, you said twice as much, what is that actual dollar value of increased nitrogen cost per acre, do you know?
Just for nitrogen, I mean, we were paying like $2,000, and I think in 2021 it was like $4,200, and that's on like 8 acres. So
great, thanks. And Justin Rich is sharing NatureSafe 1300 is $1,450 to $1,650 a ton, depending on supplier. And looks like fertilizer costs are going up all over the place. Thanks again, Hillary.